All-knowing and all-powerful, starting with the elderly wolf uncle. Chapter 79. Nick in the office of the director of SHIELD Fury, already couldn't help but stand up. Eyes fixed on the screen in front of you. His mood was very different from Ross's. Nick, Fury has listed Chen Tian as a danger that must be dealt with. It's just that now, after seeing the strength of Chen Tian's true strength, he suddenly realized that if he wanted to deal with the other party, he had to think long-term. With the strength that Chen Tian was showing now, conventional means could no longer have any effect on him. Come to think of it, Nick Fury couldn't help but clench his fists. Then, from the footage he captured from other cameras, he accidentally saw Professor Charles in the car. Look at this mutant who is classified as having the same threat as nuclear weapons. Nick, a dark light flashed under Fury's eyes, and his eyes narrowed slightly, not knowing what he was thinking. Roar. Then, the Hulk's angry roar suddenly came from the picture, drawing his attention back to the main screen. I saw Hulk stand up from the pile of ruins again, shaking off his dust, and beating his chest with both hands imposingly. Roar. He yelled and wanted to keep fighting. But when his gaze swept over the torn abomination, he was directly stunned in place. Before hating, it was difficult to fight with him. How did he become this ghost in the blink of an eye? Just as the Hulk's movements gradually slowed down, he noticed Chen Tian standing on the flesh and blood of hatred, and slowly raised his head. The calm and indifferent gaze was projected towards him. In those deep black eyes, there is clearly no extreme emotion, but it is extremely intimidating. Being targeted by it completely gives people a sense of crushing from the dimension of life. Just a glance at it immediately made the Hulk feel creepy. The Hulk's roar stopped abruptly. The raised hands softened. The ferocity in his eyes gradually collapsed, and he felt some kind of fear that penetrated into his marrow, as if a weak little animal saw an invincible predator, and instantly engulfed him. Roar. Subsequently, after the Hulk actually roared lowly, he turned around and ran without hesitation, fast as the wind. A pair of big feet stepped on the ground at an extremely fast frequency, making the ground tremble. The behemoth body disappeared into the darkness in the blink of an eye. That's all about? Chen Tian looked in the direction where the other party disappeared and shook his head speechlessly. Didn't expect to subdue the Hulk so easily. But now that the ability to copy was almost copied, he didn't bother to chase, and suddenly raised his feet and walked towards the location where Logan and they parked. On a gunship. General Ross was stunned when he saw this scene, and his eyes widened in shock. This runs. The invincible, furious Hulk, when facing the enemy, does not even have the courage to continue to strike, turn around and run. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but have a strange expression on his face. Before, in order to capture the Hulk, they don't know how many people were paid and many soldiers were sacrificed. However, the other side has always maintained an invincible posture, and does not pay attention to the army led by Ross at all. And now, such a Hulk was actually directly scared away. General, are you going to chase? The subordinates on the side also came back to their senses and asked for instructions after a brief pause. General Ross looked at the pleading under his daughter's Betty beside him, sighed and waved his hand, signaling that he didn't have to chase. Land first, I have something to say to the young man. He said immediately. The words fell. The gunship he was riding on immediately leaned over to the location where Logan and they parked and landed slowly. And Tony Stark also controlled the steel suit at this time and flew towards Chen Tian. Something? Chen Tianwang went down to the helicopter, and General Ross, who came with a smile, asked in a deep voice. Although I don't know what the other party really means, at this moment, he has the confidence to face everything that may happen in front of him. Can I know who you really are? This friend, quote. Although Ross wanted Chen Tianzi to participate in his research in his heart, thinking of the other party's terrifying strength, he had to try to make him appear friendly. Next to Tony, Stark was also curious about the matter. After just now, he had understood that Chen Tian was not just Mr. Wilson's partner. Ross, I know what you're thinking. But I want to warn you, this guy's name is Chen Tian, he is an extremely dangerous mutant, and he is hostile to the authorities. At this time, Nick Fury's voice suddenly rang out from Ross's earphones. The latter's face instantly changed when he heard these words, and his gaze towards Chen Tian was suddenly a little shocked. Chen Tian, who was standing on the opposite side, had extraordinary five senses and naturally heard Nick Fury's voice. So he smiled and said, he's right, I'm a mutant. Quote, your military better not provoke me at will, otherwise something will happen. Next to Tony, when Stark heard this, his eyebrows raised slightly, I didn't expect to meet mutants again. Quote, he spoke in a tone that was not the slightest bit repulsive, just a little surprised. After all, for so many years, the government has been saying that mutants have gradually disappeared from the world, and today they can actually run into one. Tony, stay away from him. General Ross looked solemn and unconsciously took a step back, while glancing at Tony, who was still approaching. Stark, remind out loud. I'm not a sociology expert, and I don't find Chen hostile. Tony, Stark spread his hands, and the suit mask opened at the same time, revealing a handsome face with a beard. He looked at Chen Tian and said with a smile on his face, to be honest, Chen, I am very interested in having an in-depth exchange with you. I always thought you would be a fun friend. Tony of this period, Stark hasn't experienced much yet, and Ren is a playful playboy in the face of a lot of things. Chen Tian smiled when he heard this. As the person who knows the other party best, he knows that he is telling the truth, and if conditions permit, Chen Tian is also willing to make friends with Iron Man. But right now, it's clearly not a good time. We can talk about it when we have time, but for now, I'm ready to go back and rest. Saying that, Chen Tian nodded in greeting, and then turned around and prepared to leave. Chen Tian, you give me a stand. Quote. Seeing this, General Ross looked anxious and took 2 steps forward to stop people. Whether the other party is a mutant or something else, the terrifying power in his body is real. It is also what he is after. It was clear that he was so close, but letting the other party leave directly did make General Ross a little difficult to accept. Ross, I warn you that it's best not to make a move with Chen Tian. But before he finished speaking, Nick came from the headset again. Fury's gloomy voice. Hearing this reminder, Ross woke up like a dream and remembered the scene when Chen Tian had just shown his strength. Damn, what did I almost do? Ross came back to his senses, looked at his daughter and other comrades on the gunship behind him, and suddenly felt that his body was a little stiff, and his whole body was soaked in cold sweat. Chen Tian is an existence that can tear up hatred. If they really provoked him, the other party wanted to destroy all the military people present, but it was just a matter of raising their hands. Thankfully, Nick Fury grabbed himself in time when he reached the edge of the cliff. Think of this. A trace of bitterness and helplessness suddenly appeared on Ross's face, and he could only stand in place, watching Chen Tian, who made his heart move, and gradually left after getting into the car. After a long time, alas. First chapter previous chapter 79.